A very good evening to you all, and I'd like to first of all thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me here, Casa Árabe and the University of San Damasco for having me here. Just to give a brief history of who I am, I'm an Irish white father, missionary, having lived my missionary life, most of it, over 25 years in the Arab world between Algeria, Sudan, the Holy Land of Jerusalem, and I now find myself in the Gulf, in Dubai. I am not a professional academic, although I have studied Arabic and Islamics, and if I can admit that I'm not an academic, but what I've come to do this evening is to present an image of what the churches, what the Catholic Church and the different churches are like today in the Arabian Gulf, in the Arabian Peninsula. Let me begin, first of all, by giving a brief history of Christians in the Arabic Gulf in the modern times. Of course, we have dealt with the ancient times, and there was a whole gap, and now we are right up into the 19th century, where the first missionaries came to Aden in 1841, Catholic missionaries, 2 years after the British had taken the port and established their rule over the port city and the surrounding territory. And it was from there that the Capuchin missionaries first of all from France, and then they were followed by Capuchin missionaries from Florence and from Tuscany, if you like, started the modern missionary activity, which is similar to the missionary activity that you see in Africa with Catholic missionaries and even South America. And so the presence was very, very small, right until, I suppose, the recent discovery of oil. The missionaries were there in Aden. They had some institutions, some schools. And then, of course, you had the independences of Yemen, and the two Yemens which established themselves in the 60s. And you had the Yemen Arabic Republic of the North, of northern Yemen, with Sana'a as capital, and the People's Democratic Republic of southern Yemen, with Aden as its capital. Southern Yemen, as you know, was a fairly robust communist regime, and in the 70s it led to the expulsion of the Catholic missionaries, and they had to flee, mostly to Bahrain at the time. Schools and institutions were closed. You had the same phenomenon of nationalization in other Arabic countries, other Arab countries at the same time, with Iraq, Syria, Algeria, where many of Catholic institutions were closed, particularly schools. Then you had the unification of northern Yemen and southern Yemen in 1990, but since the unification, there hasn't really been stability, as we know. And for the last 4 to 5 years, a civil war has ensued, which has cost the lives of many. It's cost the lives of many Yemeni people, and destruction, of course, as well. 1973 was the most difficult year for the Catholic Church, when 4 mission schools were nationalized and churches and residences were confiscated. To come back to the Catholic Church institution, if you like, the first Vicariate of Arabia was established in 1888, and the Apostolic vicar lived in Aden. And the seat of the Catholic Church in Aden lasted until 1974, where it moved from Aden to Abu Dhabi. My friend who just spoke earlier spoke about the word petrol, and petrol, if you like, has changed the whole Gulf in the 20th century. And if there is a Christian presence in the Gulf today, it is because many people have come working in the petrol industry and all the other industries that have followed. So with the discovery of petrol in the Gulf countries, many people, particularly from Southern Asia, came to work as workers and to help the countries as they established as independent countries in the 70s. The number of Catholic missionaries increased from Italy, but also from the South Asian continent. So today, if we can talk about the situation in the different Gulf countries, of course, we're talking about the Gulf Peninsula, but there are many different realities in the 6 countries of the Gulf. Here we have some photos of the first church in Abu Dhabi in 1965. You see it's built in the middle of the desert. Here you have a map of the current political situation with Yemen north and south, as you see. Sorry, oops. No, how do I go back? Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh, it's going all over the place for me. It is going all over the place. Can somebody come to my help? Sorry. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So, as you see, the church today is present in the 6 countries of the Arabian Peninsula. And I'd like to deal with some statistics. As you see here, the countries most populated, Saudi Arabia with 30 million, and Yemen with 26 million, and the UAE with approximately 9 million. And the total number of Catholics today, as you see in Saudi Arabia, is 1.5 million Catholics. And in the UAE, approximately 900,000 Catholics. Here we're talking about Catholics. I speak mostly of Catholics, but of course you have to include also other churches. Catholics, I reckon, make up approximately 70 to 80% of the total Christian population. Here again, we're talking about a science that isn't very precise. There are countries where there is no documentation about the numbers of Christians. Sometimes we have sources from governments as to who is Christian, who is not Christian, but it's very difficult to know who is Catholic, who is non-Catholic, etc. So this is the situation then of parishes in the different Gulf countries. Bahrain with 2 parishes, Kuwait with 4, Oman with 4 parishes, Qatar with 1 big parish, Saudi Arabia 3, and there you have a little star after Saudi Arabia, because we don't have any official parishes, but of course we have Christians, and we have priests who minister to these Christians. As I said, we have at least 1.5 million Christians in Saudi Arabia today, and we have approximately 15 priests who minister to these Christians, mostly who minister incognito, and work in difficult situations in house churches, in embassies, particularly in embassies. Again, you have a star after Yemen, but because, as I speak today, unfortunately, we have no priests left in Yemen. We have 2 communities of Mother Teresa's sisters, the Missionaries of Charity. You will have heard, of course, that 4 sisters were slaughtered just 5 weeks ago. 4 sisters, 1 other Christian, and 12 Muslims. So 16 people were killed in this operation in all. 5 of them were Christian and 11 of them were Muslim. This was in Aden just 5 weeks ago. And one of the priests who ministers to this community, Father Tom, a Salesian from India, is currently kidnapped. And we hope that he is alive. So then if I come to the UAE, today we have 8 parishes in the United Arab Emirates. As I said, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the biggest country with the biggest population of over 30 million, and expatriates are about 33%, and Catholics are about 1.5 million. So I presume you can count about 2 million Christians altogether in Saudi Arabia today. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is an Islamic theocratic monarchy in which Sunni Islam is the official state religion. Religious freedom is literally non-existent, and its minority Shiite communities suffer discrimination. The government does not provide any legal recognition or protection for freedom of religion, and it is severely restricted in practice. One of the reasons is a hadith or saying of the Prophet Muhammad that Islam is the only religion of the land. Christians gather in embassies or in private homes for religious practice. There are frequent arrests and expulsions of people organizing prayer services. The Holy See does not have any diplomatic relations with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, although there are contacts, but there are informal contacts. State of Qatar, a population of over 2 million, and expatriates are 88% of the population. And we estimate that there are at least 250,000 Catholics, one parish, one big church, and approximately 8 priests serving this country. Qatar, despite being a Wahhabi state, in the constitution, as well as certain laws, provide for freedom of association, public assembly, and worship in accordance with the requirements of public order and morality. Notwithstanding this, the law prohibits proselytizing by non-Muslims, and some places there are restrictions on public worship. Islam is a state religion. And since the arrival of Hamad bin Khalifa al-Thani in 1995, there have been huge reforms, as you probably know, in the Qatari regime, which was rather backward-looking. It was very attached politically to Saudi Arabia, but since 1995, it has gained a lot of independence, if you like, political independence, with all that we know about that as well. You know. So there have been huge progress even in the domain of religious freedom. The Kingdom of Bahrain, a population of 1.3 million, and expatriates are about just over 50%, and Catholics approximately 80,000. And Bahrain is now the seat of the Bishop of Northern Arabia. In the Catholic Church at the moment, we have 2 dioceses, one on the north and one on the south. Northern Arabia covers Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, whereas the southern diocese where I work is the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Yemen. This is a picture of the new church in Doha, which houses approximately 2,000 people. And it's overflowing. It's overflowing. As you see, many of the faithful are Indian, Filipino. Coming back to Bahrain, the Constitution of Bahrain states that Islam is the official religion and that Sharia, Islamic law, is the principal source of legislation. The Constitution provides for freedom of conscience and the inviolability of worship. Some restrictions are placed on the exercise of this right. One thing about Bahrain, I mentioned to you that the Bishop of Bahrain, Bishop Balin, Camilo Balin, since his arrival there was able to obtain Bahraini nationality. He received this from the king, and a few years ago as well, he also acquired a big plot of land for a new cathedral, which he's currently building. This is the present church, but again, as you can imagine, with 80,000 worshippers, it's too small for the needs of the people. Kuwait, a population of 3.7 million, expatriates again approximately 70%, and Catholics approximately 150,000. There are 4 parishes, there are 20 priests, sisters, schools, and it was the see of the bishop until he moved to Bahrain a few years ago, 5 years ago, but it is there where the Apostolic Nuncio resides. The Apostolic Nuncio is nuncio for 5 of the 7 states in the Arabian Peninsula. In other words, all the states today have diplomatic relations with the Vatican, except for Saudi Arabia and Oman. Saudi Arabia because it's Saudi Arabia, and Oman perhaps because they haven't managed to establish relations yet with Oman, but things are moving in that direction. The Constitution of Kuwait provides for absolute freedom of belief and freedom of religious practice. The Constitution once again states that Islam is the state religion and that Sharia is a source of legislation. It has to be said that I think in all the Arab Muslim countries, almost all, in the first article or in the preamble, Islam is mentioned as either the source of legislation or the source. It's mostly mentioned as the source of legislation, either Islam or Sharia. Oman, it has a population of over 4 million and expatriates of about 44%, and Catholics are approximately 100,000. And here again we have 4 parishes in Oman, with 2 in Muscat, the capital, and 2 in the other ends of the country. One in Salalah, which is very near the Yemeni border, and the other in Sohar, which is near the UAE border. The basic law, in accordance with tradition, declares that Islam is a state religion and that Sharia is a source of legislation. It also prohibits discrimination based on religion and provides for freedom to practice religious rights as long as they do not disrupt public order. This question of public order is a very important concept in most Arab and Muslim countries. So coming back once again to Yemen, Yemen, as you probably know, is a country that is not part of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation countries. It is the poor brother of the Arabian Peninsula. And it's very much on the outside of everything that happens. It's not part of the whole petrol boom. Its standard of living, of course, is much lower than any of the other countries. And unfortunately, for the last 20 years, it has been suffering from civil war and lack of economic prosperity. I mentioned here that we have no priests at the moment in the country, and the number of Christians, the numbers here, 2,000. I think today there are less than 2,000 Christians in Yemen. The Constitution of Yemen provides for freedom of religion, and the government generally respects the right and practice. However, there are some restrictions. The Constitution once more declares that Islam is a state religion and that Sharia is a source of all legislation. Government policy continued to contribute to the general free practice of religion. However, there are some restrictions. I want to come back again to the recent crisis because Yemen is part of our diocese. And as I mentioned, 4 sisters and 12 other people were slaughtered just 5 weeks ago. But it wasn't the first time. Already back in 1997, 4 of Mother Teresa's sisters were killed in Hodeidah, this port city on the Red Sea. So this is the second time in 18 years that the Congregation of the Missionaries of Charity have been hit in Yemen, and still they decide to stay there. This is something very, very beautiful and heroic. Here is a photo of the sisters who were killed just 6 weeks ago. 2 sisters from Rwanda, 1 from India, and 1 from Kenya. This is just a photo of the house that we're renting as a church in Sana'a. And this is a photo of the church in Sana'a, which over a year ago was burned. So nothing of this, unfortunately, exists today. Now, let me go to the United Arab Emirates, which is the country I know the best because I've been living there for the last 4 years. And I suppose it's, if you like, the perfect example of religious tolerance and coexistence that exists in, I would say, the Arab world. The other countries as well around are tolerant, like Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, but I think we're very fortunate in the United Arab Emirates to be able to live in a regime which tolerates Christianity, and which over the last 30 to 40 years, the church has not only been tolerated, but has also thrived. approximately 9.4 million Christians, and expatriates make up 85% of the population. Today we have approximately 900,000 Catholics, parishes 8, we have over 40 priests, we have 25 sisters, and we have, this figure is not correct, we have 10 schools at the moment in the country. 10 schools. 5 schools belonging to the Vicariate, and 5 schools belonging to other religious congregations, sisters' congregations. The Constitution of the United Arab Emirates provides for freedom of religion in accordance with established customs, and the government generally respects this right in practice. However, there are restrictions. The Federal Constitution declares that Islam is the official religion of the country. There were no reports of societal abuse or discrimination based on religious belief and practice. And here I would like to mention a new law that came out last July, making it a crime to discriminate on the grounds of religion. And this is again, I think, the wish of the Emirati authorities to prove that theirs is a society which is open and tolerant. And again, it's probably unique in the Arab world. The Dubai Skyline, everybody says, oh, you're living in Dubai. And this is true, it is rather, some people call it it's like a Disneyland for adults, yeah. And it is true, it is very, very beautiful. And there have been, huge developments in the last 20 to 30 years. Apartments in the Emirate of Ajman, where you have buildings that are growing all over the place. Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, over 830 meters high, which is very, very beautiful. City of Sharjah, right beside Dubai. Beautiful planning, generally speaking. Yeah. And all this development has happened thanks to foreign workers. Foreign workers, people say migrants, people say workers. Of course, you have people from all levels of society. You have workers that are working in the buildings, that are working on the roads. You have people who are working in education, in the hospitals, hundreds and thousands of Filipino nurses, Filipino working in companies, in sales, in selling in Dubai Mall, in the airports, in Emirates, all over the place. And then, of course, you have hundreds of thousands of people as well in high management posts, mostly coming from the developed world, coming from the United States, coming from Britain, but also huge communities of French, of German, of Irish, of Spanish, who in one way or another are bringing their block to the huge development that has taken place in the United Arab Emirates over the last 20 to 30 years. Again, some photos of Sharjah. Beautiful mosque of the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi, which is a beautiful piece of architecture. The UAE, where church and mosque go side by side. Again, it's true to say that near many of our churches there is a mosque, because there's a mosque almost every 500 or 700 meters. There are more mosques in Dubai than there are churches in Rome. And yet, there are churches and mosques that go side by side. And I think I use this analogy of churches and mosques go side by side because, again, it's a place where the authorities want that there be a freedom of religion, and that people are able to practice their religion, educate their children, earn a better life freely. This is a picture of one of our Mass services in St. Joseph's Church, the Cathedral Church in Abu Dhabi. And this is the opening just a few months ago of one of our new schools in Dubai, with Bishop Paul Hinder, who is the Capuchin bishop from Switzerland, opening the school. We purchased a school, and the land is rented from the Dubai land commission, if you like. And there we have at the moment 800 students, but in 4 or 5 years' time we hope to have about 1,400 students from 25 different nationalities. And it has been run by Filipina sisters of St. Paul of Chartres congregation. There you have the Filipina sisters on the left, with an Indian lady who is an Indian sister running one of our other schools beside them. This is our new church called St. Teresa's Church in Abu Dhabi, which was just blessed last year. As you see, people from every country, tribe and tongue and people and nation. A Catholic church of different rites and languages. Although officially the Vicariate is a Latin Vicariate, we also cater for the worshippers in other rites, particularly the Syro-Malabar rite and the Syro-Malankara rite from Kerala, but also Maronite, Greek Catholic. Here you have a Greek Catholic liturgy. And on the left you have a Greek Catholic priest who is from the Ukraine, and a Greek Catholic priest on the right in white who's from Lebanon. He, by the way, is a convert from Islam. There are not many of them, but he is a convert from Islam. And I'm in the middle. You see my bald head. A church of Oriental Christians, Syro-Malankara Catholic Church with Bishop Paul Hinder in the middle. Procession day in Doha, Qatar, with 2 Syro-Malankara bishops. And of Latins, of Italians and Egyptian Coptic Christians. So what I'm trying to say is that we live in the Gulf today a very unique church experience, which is universal, which is Catholic, and where everybody gets along, believe it or not. Yeah? This is an old picture of the church in Abu Dhabi, which was built in 1983, St. Joseph's Church in Abu Dhabi. And this is the new building here, which you see, which I just showed you the inside of in one of the former slides. And this is St. Mary's Church, Dubai. That's where I live. St. Mary's Church, Dubai can hold about 2,600 people, but normally at every Mass we have, at the weekends, we have 5,000 to 6,000 people. Where do we put them? They all stand outside. They stand outside under the sun, sometimes in temperatures of 38, 39, 40, 45 degrees. This is St. Michael's Church in Sharjah. Specifics, okay. Different cultures and nationalities. This is something which, as I said, I'd like to emphasize because really Dubai is almost the center of the world, that you have all different cultures and nationalities. Most of those who attend our churches come from the South Asian continent, from India and from the Philippines. But really we have people from every nation. A laboratory in the modern world. The blessing of a new church experience. And this is something very, very positive, very challenging. People working together. Coming out of an exclusive attachment to race, language, ethnicity. So you have people from Kerala working with Maronites from Lebanon, working with Europeans and working with Americans. Discovering of all that is universal. Here is the timetable for St. Joseph's Church. And if you go down, Masses in other languages, you have Arabic, Filipino, Malayalam, Tamil, Konkani, Malakandra, Urdu, Sinhalai, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Korean, all over the weekend, in one weekend. This is Palm Sunday procession, and as you see, this is Bishop Paul, and behind the cathedral is a mosque. Chances of a truly Catholic experience. Now, one of the challenges of having so many people is that we don't have enough space. We have 8 churches for a population of 800,000, and even if only 20% of those came to church every weekend. We're still very much stuck for space. Monday, Thursday with only standing space. You see people are even standing between the cars. I celebrate sometimes the French Mass on a Saturday evening. And a few weeks ago, one of the French community said, "Mon père, I went to communion, and when I came back, there were 2 Filipinos in my place." That is the reality we have. Queuing for confession. Yes, Holy Week is like Golgotha for priests, because we have hours and hours and hours of confessions. In the end, we just have to give general absolution. I mean, gathered around the altar. You see, this is an outside altar in Abu Dhabi. Good Friday veneration of the cross. And of course, you have a lot of pious customs from the different countries. The Spanish bring, or the Filipinos bring with them Santo Niño. You know, they have big celebrations. The Indians from Tamil Nadu have certain celebrations like Our Lady of Valankani. And of course, the Indians from Goa have celebration of St. Francis Xavier, etc. This is the Easter Vigil in Abu Dhabi. So outside the churches, then you have prayer rooms in labor camps. And you have a lot of new groups that are establishing, that are coming together. And they're coming together for prayer, very often charismatic prayer, believe it or not. Particularly the Indians, but also the Filipinos, charismatic prayer. And you see them coming together regularly for charismatic prayer. And this is a big challenge for us, church leaders, if you like, between encouraging and managing, because you have a lot of the Pentecostalist type Catholic charismatic leaders who are coming alive, and sometimes it's a bit of a challenge. But it's also, of course, a grace. Prayer in a labor camp. I'm looking at the time. Oh yes, I'm looking at my time. My time is going. I'm nearly finished. Charismatic prayer once more. Churches' service to the poor, charitable activities, poverty amidst great wealth, limited legal assistance, and self-help group in parishes. We try as best we can to reach out to those who are most poor. And there you see a poor worker collecting the rubbish in the desert. People without him. Without people like him, nothing goes in, of course. You have the people who are doing the difficult jobs. Worker taking a break. Labor camp. This is a picture of a labor camp in Abu Dhabi. Who build the skyscrapers? Of course, laborers, mostly. And the palaces. Challenges. So lack of stability, guest workers without rights. Kafala system sponsorship, no access to nationality. Political, trade unions, freedom of association, freedom of press, highly restricted. Abuse of laborers and housemaids in UAE, however, much has been done in the last years. Human trafficking, prostitution, severe implementation of country's laws, immediate imprisonment for any violations. So you find a lot of people in prison for drugs, for prostitution, for alcohol offenses. Visa refused, Anunatu. This is a Syrian whose visa was refused. This is for a Schengen visa, but in fact, it's a universal. So the UAE, a land of opportunity for many, land of opportunity from poverty, unemployment, and war. South Asian, European, Arab societies in transition. Tolerant society, a controlled Islam. I think this is very important. And openness to economic and cultural development for the betterment of all. Dialogue of life as guests in a Muslim country. Here you see one of the openings of the churches. Ecumenical Christmas with local representatives. I think it's an important ground for ecumenical dialogue as well. And there is the final slide of St. Joseph's School in Abu Dhabi on Sports Day. I think I went over my time a small bit, but I'd like to say thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much indeed.